Welcome to the latest episode of How I'm Building This, our season 3 of Sutures and Cents, where we interview CEOs, founders, leaders of small med device companies who are trying to take the path of most resistance. Why would anybody take the path of most resistance? Why don't you just go work and be successful at a big company that has all the money and everything figured out? Well, we're going to talk to somebody today who's taking this path of most resistance. Sutures and Sense is our podcast where Tegader meets Top Line and Surgiflow meets Soft Costs. We talk business to clinical, clinical to business, and lots of other cool things. So, and it's all in the name of better patient care. So this season, again, we're about the small med device companies that are disrupting incumbents, wrecking contracts, sometimes screwing up our friends in supply chain. Today's guest is Kevin DeMarco. Kevin is the CEO and co-founder of RIF, R-I-F, RIF Robotics. Now here's a quick 30-second backgrounder on the market that RIF Robotics is disrupting. Well, there isn't one, right? There are no robots being used that I've seen and being sold and used regularly in sterile processing departments. These are the folks that clean, reprocess, sterilize surgical instruments, and much, much more. But generally speaking, for today, that's what we'll be talking about. How big is the market? It's really hard to tell because the market doesn't exist. Who are the big incumbents, or as we like to say, targets? Well, the big companies in the business are companies like Steris, Getinge, Healthmark is now part of Getinge. But really the big incumbent is what I would consider to be thinking an old way. Let's throw more people at it. It's a highly difficult, highly stressful, easy to make an error field. So let's throw more people at it. And it just doesn't work these days for reasons you'll find out in the podcast. So why would anybody want to do what Kevin DeMarco is doing, try to bring robots to assemble surgical trays? Why would somebody who's smart, driven, and accomplished want to do this? Well, let's talk to Kevin DeMarco of RIF Robotics, RIF Robotics, and let's find out why. All right, Kevin, we're neighbors, we're friends. We walk out the driveway, we're taking the garbage out at the same time. And I'm like, hey, Kev, I heard you started a company about some kind of robot or something. And I'm in the automotive industry.
Yeah,
I wouldn't know a sterile processing department from you pick it, right? What would you tell me so that I understand what you guys are doing, what problem you're solving in a way that a non-clinician, non-industry person would understand? How would you describe that?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I tell people who don't know anything about this industry is, the last time you or a loved one went in for surgery, you thought about, the doctor or the surgeon that was going to operate on you. You thought about any pre-op procedures you'd have to do or post-op. Probably think about how anesthesia might affect you and the drugs, but you probably didn't really think about the fact that the same instruments that are going to be used on you were used on someone else the day before or even that same day earlier. And it's the job of a healthcare employee to ensure the sterility of those when they have so many other demands on their time, taking care of people and, not having enough equipment sometimes. So what we're building is a system that helps healthcare professionals automate the inspection and assembly of surgical trays to make sure that those instruments that are used on you are clean and sterile.
Okay. I like that a lot. I'm going to suspect people don't ever think about their instruments when you have this conversation, right? Mm-hmm. It's funny. I'm going to start asking people now, but I'm going to still pretend to be your automotive industry dopey neighbor, right? So that's interesting. I'm sure, Kevin, that there's got to be a lot of robots and stuff like that in this business because it's complex, complicated instruments, I would think, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What would you say?
Yeah. So I would say, people have a misconception of how robotics are really used in the real world and how they're deployed. And a lot of that's because of Hollywood or other startups talking about having claims about what the robotics can do and how much they're really using them. But robotics up until now have mostly been only applicable for highly repeatable tasks that you would find in, say, like assembling a car or, And they're just starting to getting into being able to paint cars or sand cars. And even those, the car shows up in an exact spot every time, and the robot pretty much runs an exact program every time. Whereas with surgical trays in hospitals, a hospital have thousands, if not tens of thousands, of different types of trays, each with between 50 and 100 instruments in them, and they're all different. And we expect people to be able to all day look at instruments, thousands of instruments, and not make a mistake, not miss the fact that an instrument maybe wasn't cleaned properly, or not accidentally misidentify an instrument. And what makes the task really hard, and so I'll say, in robotics, we say some of the best problems to solve with robotics are ones that have the 3 Ds: dull, dirty, and dangerous. And sterile processing has all of them. It's potentially dull because you're looking at thousands of instruments. It's dirty. We've met technicians who have actually, contracted diseases doing this job.
Yeah.
And it's dangerous as well, right? For those same reasons. And then it's also a really high risk job with respect to not only the employees, but also for the patients. So if it's not done correctly, patients can get infections. You can have delayed operating room procedures. You could be under anesthesia longer than you expect. So it's just the complexity of the trays. Robotics up until now haven't been able to handle that. And so we've depended on people manually picking up every instrument, looking at it with just eyeballs. Typically, there are some, you might have some microscopes or some special cameras that can look inside objects. But then even given the demands on their time, they often don't even get a chance to use all that equipment to do a thorough job.
Right. Yeah. I'll stop being your neighbor and I'll start being a person in the industry. So thanks.
Yeah.
I actually thought that was a really good way to describe it. And those 3 Ds, dull, dirty, and dangerous.
Yep.
Like I have a couple fraternity brothers that would have described that way, but I actually think that's a good way to describe it because I heard somebody say one time, it might have been Hank Balch, I'm not certain, but that working in the decontamination part of sterile processing is the most dangerous spot in any hospital. And I never thought about it. And as soon as that person said it, I wish I could attribute it to the right person. I remember thinking, wow, they're absolutely right. And I know you would work in part of this, but to your dull, dirty, and dangerous, the second two, it's absolutely the case, particularly in a 4th D, decontamination, but it's throughout the process. So yeah, I really like that. I will tell you, when I first got into med device, I got into spine in 2005. And it took me about 2 years to get over the fact that we would use 10 trays of instruments, spine instruments, general instruments, put it in a case cart, send it to a different part of the hospital. And then you'd go where that place was, and you'd see how it came down, and then how they would assemble it again for the next day or 2 days, whatever. And I remember thinking, how do they not lose everything? How does this? I was astounded at how good they were. And just, I think if you dropped somebody outside the business, or even people for the OR in and said, here, take a look at what this looks like, I think people are shocked by the raw material that comes into sterile processing. And that's back to your point about robotics. I did not think about that painting cars, but they're always in the same spot. It's a rinse and repeat, and the raw material that comes into sterile processing isn't like that.
It isn't like that at all. Exactly. And, and I can talk a little bit about, the first product we're building, and then how the technology we're developing is going to lead it to be able to be deployed in decontam, and then maybe even the operating room in the future. And yeah, totally. And I think it's going to be a combination of things. It's, this new kind of robotics technology that's coming out now that's more adaptive and responsive and can exist outside of a factory. That's coming, and we're doing deployments where we're testing these ideas. But then there will be a time probably where it shifts, where, okay, we're really confident in these technologies, but some of these really unstructured tasks, like in decontam, now that we trust this company that has a product that works in tray assembly, we can trust them to help us maybe redo our decontam and maybe reorganize it such that it makes the robotic automation of it even easier or simpler or lower cost, instead of trying to do, sometimes the naive approach is, oh, well, let's just look how people do it and exactly copy it with a robot and do that. but that doesn't always make sense when you're developing new technology.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wouldn't have thought about it. That's a preconceived notion that really doesn't apply. I mean, obviously, you understand that because this is your area of expertise, but I would not have initially thought of that. It's funny. By the way, for the people who are listening to this, Kevin and I have been trying to meet for a couple of years. I think. We've had a couple of close near misses, but so this is the first time we've talked. But this is cool. This is why I think this is important: is to ask questions to people like Kevin who have created this company with his partners and Riff Robotics, because this is the future. And I watched the Hurt Locker a couple of weeks ago, and they were using robots, drones, things like that, to go try to defuse bombs or at least look at them. And that's a bit of an over dramatization of sterile processing, but it's actually closer than a lot of, especially in decontamination, it's probably a lot closer than people know, because I mean, that's a dangerous place to work every single day.
In fact, there are real stats on this that a sterile processing department has 3x the worker comp claims compared to other parts in the hospital.
I didn't know that.
So so people really are getting hurt there. Maybe trays are too heavy. They're reaching into dirty trays and getting cut by sharps. They're asked to go faster to get more trays turned over, and that's when mistakes happen.
Yeah, I think I remember, and I know Dr. Peter Nichols talks about this, and he actually directed me. I looked it up in the Bureau of Labor and Statistics through 2023, I think it was. So there's 67,000 sterile processing techs in the country, and we have a national shortfall of about 10%. Like we have a 10% FTE shortage. And so I've argued with some very nice, smart people that they keep thinking, well, we have to hire more sterile. And I'm saying, like, you can't grow them fast enough. You need to look at things like what Kevin's creating and building, because you're not going to be able to do that. And they're moving and changing positions and things like that as well. Like, making more people is not a viable option moving forward. Things like what you're doing have to be part of the mix.
Absolutely. And I would say, one thing that the way that we're looking at this is you still need actually many people in the loop to working with these systems. So a kind of analogy I make is maybe 40 years ago, we didn't have automatic washing machines that work as well as they do today. And you had, 4 or 5 times the number of people in sterile processing departments just washing instruments. And now it goes from 20 people washing instruments in decontam to 2 to 5, right? But now they're doing what we call in kind of industrial manufacturing, they're doing machine tending. So they're loading machines, they're unloading machines, they're using them, and so their jobs have changed a bit in how they do that. We see the same kind of change is going to happen in tray assembly, where right now tray assembly is a person takes a tray out of a washer, they bring it to a workbench that really isn't anything special, right? It's set up with lights, maybe a magnifying glass, a computer, and they're supposed to manually take all the instruments out, look at them, put them back in the tray, and hopefully you didn't leave your pen in there by accident. Hopefully hair from your beard or your eyelashes didn't fall into that tray, and because they're also keeping track of every person and what tray they're assembling. So you only get noticed when you make a mistake, right? Yeah,
nobody gets a pat on the back for, hey, you did 700 in a row correct, 701, and you make a mistake, and
it's like being a referee or an umpire. You only get noticed when you make a mistake,
right? That's a good analogy.
Exactly. So then we see it going from a single person working on a single tray to a person tending to maybe 3 or 4 machines that they're setting up and taking down. And once in a while, these are complicated systems with like complicated trays. Once in a while, robots can say, hey, I'm having a problem unhooking this thing. Can you help me? And the person will unhook it and say, okay, keep going, robot, keep doing your job, right? And then the robot's doing all the counting. And now you have better auditability and traceability for those trays. And it provides a level of protection for the employee as well to be like, I used this system as expected. It collected all the images as the tray was being built. And we told you ahead of time if something was missing because we need to order it or something, versus it sort of just, hey, people are just expected to do it perfectly every time, which we know is impossible.
No, right. It's
Yeah.
it's actually an unreasonable expectation,
Yep.
yet it's the one that every place has. And frankly, there's a weight to it. Like, it's, if you make a mistake, it's not like you're Amazon, you're like, oh, hey, just ship me a label and send it back. Like, it causes delays in the OR,
Yep.
it causes patient jeopardy, it causes, I mean, and ultimately you're trying to make sterile processing better, safer, more repeatable, faster. And a lot of people would think, oh, well, that's, are you getting rid of jobs? I'm like, no,
It's,
right? I mean, how would you respond to that?
yeah, I would say, for one, I would say there's people who come into sterile processing and they learn it for a few months and they're like, this is not for me at all. I would say there is a subset of people who really, really enjoy it, who have the attention to detail for it. And honestly, when we speak to those people, they're like, this makes so much sense. This is going to make me and my team do a better job. And because we're thinking about patient safety, and they know that. And the reality is, like I said, we still have people in decontam with all these automatic washing machines. You go to a factory in China where tons of robots are building things. There's still a lot of people in there working with the robots, working on assembling things. The idea is to try to make it easier for everyone to do their job so you can have a higher quality product. And like what Dr. Peter Nichol says, it's, with the labor dynamics, we don't have enough people coming up that are being trained in this to do it well enough, and they need help. And so it's, the jobs are going to change for sure. But also, we work with sterile processing people every day. So I really think about them. It's not about replacing them. It's about helping them do a better job. And I come from a family of my mom, my aunt, my uncle were all nurses in hospitals. And it's just the reality. It's older population, not enough people. They need help and new tools to help them.
Yeah, I like it. So it was a nice segue. I was going to start to talk to you about, ask you about how you guys came up with this, right? And
Yeah.
I was this is what I read, and I read that I think your grandfather owned or ran a paper mill, if I read that correctly.
Yeah. My uncle, my grandfather on my dad's side, he was a World War II vet, came back on the GI Bill, got a mechanical engineering degree, ran a paper mill in upstate New York for most of his life as a mechanical engineer. So,
but I know you. Then I saw that you had parents and family members who work in the OR, nurses.
yeah.
And if what I read is correct, did an aunt say something to you about robots? Is there one out there for assembling trays? Tell me about that.
Yeah. So I would say the way it kind of worked out was my aunt asked, she's working in an operating room in Philadelphia, and she's like, every day I've got the wrong instruments delivered to my operating room. She's like, can you make a robot that can assemble a surgical case cart? That's what she said. And this was probably back in 2019, 2020. And I had no idea what a surgical case cart was.
I was going to ask you, did you know anything about this?
Yeah. I was like, oh, what's that? So what was good about that timing was I was working as research faculty in a robotics lab at Georgia Tech, where we were working on things for, controlling multiple drones in the air, having robots plug and unplug USB plugs is a surprisingly hard problem for robots, right? Doing things like autonomous driving for some DARPA competitions and humanoids for some DARPA competitions. And during, then the pandemic rolled around and they sent us all home for a few months while they were trying to figure things out. But we got some funding and some time to think about how we can use some of the robotics and automation we developed to help healthcare employees during the pandemic, such as, hey, especially early in the pandemic, nurses didn't want to go into rooms with patients that had COVID. And so they wanted some maybe robotic system to go in there and check on them and just like touch some screens and do some basic things like that. And so that got us really thinking about, and that's when I started talking to my aunt about this. And I was like, oh, what do you think? What are the problems that you're seeing in the hospital? Kind of more open-ended, not just COVID stuff, right?
Right.
And that's when she said, I've got the wrong instruments delivered in my operating room every day. Can you make a robot that assembles a surgical case cart? then we're like, okay, let's, in our basements during the pandemic, went down YouTube rabbit hole trying to find out what sterile processing really was.
So you had no experience at all, and it sounds like.
Nope, not anymore. Like I definitely, because my mom was a nurse, she was a nurse manager. She had done patient care and became a manager at her hospital and would do scheduling. But I remember when I was in high school, then her hospital was going from, paper documentation to electronic documentation, and just how much of a headache even just doing that was for so many hospitals.
Nice way to describe it. Yeah.
Right. And here I was, a nerdy computer programming kid in high school. I'm like, why is this so hard? Like, what's going on? But so you get kind of exposed to the complexities of working with a hospital. There's a lot of interested parties, and you have to understand everyone really well, and the culture in order to bring a new product to market. You can't just drop it on them.
Let's take a break for a minute and talk to our sponsor, me. This podcast is brought to you by me, Mark Copeland, the Value Analysis Whisperer. Have you ever tried to get a new product, your new innovative medical device, approved in an ambulatory surgery center or hospital and failed? Have you ever thought about the amount of patients who can't get access to your innovative medical device because you can't get it approved? Have you ever thought about the clinician champions of yours who are frustrated because you and your company can't get your new product approved where they work? Of course you have. We all have had that happen. Here's the difference. Are you ready to make a change and do something about it? If so, go to my website, valueanalysisexpert.com, and click on some time with me, Mark Copeland, the Value Analysis Whisperer. You can do this. I will help. Now, back to our podcast. No. Especially, I used to joke, because if you could do that, you wouldn't need salespeople like me.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. But no,
That's
you're
true.
right. So this is all right. So walk me through the timeline. Here's what I have written down that I researched on you. It looked like you conceptually, if I have this correct, came up with this towards the end of 2020, right? So would have been 9 months, 10 months into the pandemic, and that's when you started to do it. When did you have? Well, walk me through the chronology.
Yeah.
So where do we first example, first case? Talk to me.
Yeah. So I would say at the end of 2020, we'd been going over this idea with one of my co-founders, Sergio Garcia, and we were talking about this problem, and we're like, oh, this is a really good problem. It meets all the 3Ds like we talked about. We believe that it's going to be net positive for society, for the system, and we're really big believers in ethical robotics and AI. And we're like, this is a really good problem to solve for all these reasons we already talked about. And so at the end of 2020, we end up leaving our research faculty roles because our lab at Georgia Tech couldn't really support developing things for the healthcare space like we were looking at after the pandemic kind of ended. So they're like, you guys can do it on the side if you want, but we can't really support you. So we end up leaving GTRI, or Georgia Tech Research Institute, and founded this company, started writing research proposals, got a few small grants. We were, so we left our regular jobs and started consulting for other robotics companies while we were doing this in order to pay for our own development and our salaries, right? Neither of us was independently wealthy that we just could stop working. And so
this is awesome. I love this. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. So we ended up both consulting for an autonomous lawn mowing company. We ended up consulting for an autonomous vacuum cleaning company. There's also a company using robotics to do automated poultry, like cutting and assessment. We're in the state of Georgia, and Georgia has a lot of chicken products compared to everywhere else in the U.S. So there were some companies around that. So by doing that, we were consultants for these other companies that allowed us to, give us time and capital in order to buy some equipment to start demonstrating what we wanted to build for sterile processing. We ended up being connected through to the Gwinnett Technical College, which was through a contact we had at Northside Hospital, Densley Koch. I don't know if you've chat with him.
No.
He's been really helpful SPD director talking about the problem, and he's made introductions to us to people at HSPA and GSPA, helped get us integrated into the community, and got us working with the Gwinnett Technical College, where they teach people how to become, they have a sterile processing degree. And so there they gave us access to their equipment, their trays. We got to see how their best practices. We learned a lot from their materials. And we recorded a demonstration of assembling a small tray of like 10 instruments. And what was novel about it was, these are instruments that were kind of randomly thrown onto a table, a single camera system that could identify them. A robot arm went and picked them up and put them in the tray in the right spot. So very basic. But then it got us started. It was able to get us far enough along where we could bring that prototype to investors and say, hey, this is what we started. This is the problem. This is how big it is. Here's a demonstration of a product that we started working on. This is a prototype, but we need more money, and to be able to spend all of our time on this, we need some capital in order to do this.
Right.
And
yeah. Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Yeah. And then so with that, we had started talking with some angel investors and venture capital investors, and and some like accelerator programs. And through that, we were able to, get our first lead investor, which was Catalyst by Wellstar, which is an innovation arm of Wellstar Hospital System. And with that, there was a venture capital.
Which is a big health. For those who don't know. Yeah, for those who don't know, that's a big health system in Georgia. And I think, and they may be in other states, but they're a pretty big system. And they have an innovation arm for companies like Kevin's that they can invest in and help develop, because they're going to end up using it potentially themselves.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
So it's a very smart thing.
Yeah. So as part of that, what they do is we presented to some of their analysts about what we were building and where we see things going. And, they're a healthcare system, but also they act like venture capitalists, where they want to know that there's a large market for it. Are you going to be able to scale quickly when the product has product market fit? But also they went in, but what's nice is, since they have internal insights to these problems themselves, they were able to go and interview in an unbiased way their sterile processing directors and their internal OR managers. And coming out of that, they're like, yeah, this is something, it's kind of nebulous still and kind of new, but if it could kind of do these things, then this could make a lot of sense for us, and we'd use it and we would buy it.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, it's actually a really good way. As opposed to standard venture capital, where you're talking to them and they don't have much.
Yeah.
They might not have much when you talk to them, but they can turn to their own internal people across multiple facilities and say, is this a problem? Kevin's saying this is a problem. They can just, and as long as what they're saying reflects what you're saying, your credibility skyrockets immediately. It's sort of a newer thing that health systems have been doing for the past 10 or 15 years. And it's very logical, but I didn't even know these things really existed till about 6 or 7 years ago. So, these innovation arms, if you will. Okay. So, and you guys are first-time founders, right?
Yep.
Like you guys have
absolutely.
not done this.
Yeah, we have not done this. I have, I have a PhD in electrical and computer engineering, but I've taken 2 business classes. I have a which results in a minor in business during my master's program. So, it's all pretty new.
That's you're probably leaning on those a little bit sometimes too, pretty hard.
Yep.
Okay, so Kevin, then I see it looks like one of the milestones that I have written down is October 2023. That's when Wellstar Catalyst invested in your company to help develop past your sort of, I don't know what you would have called that first version. It wasn't, doesn't sound like it was an MVP. It just sounded like a
proof of concept, basically. Yeah. Yep.
Right. Yep. And so at that point they invest. What's the first thing you're working on to take that proof of concept to the next iterative level? Yeah.
So what we did was we did a kind of some requirements gathering and some customer discovery at several of their hospitals. One at Wellstar's Kennestone facility, which is a really large facility they have in Kennesaw, Georgia, as well as Windy Hill, which is just northwest of Atlanta. And so we ended up being able to go into Windy Hill, where we did a pilot there, and we were able to show that we were able to assemble one of their minor orthopedic trays. And, minor orthopedic, still like 90 instruments, right? So a lot,
it's minor in name only. It's
exactly.
complex in every facet of it.
Exactly. So that first system we built, it was basically, okay, we're going to have a better robot. We're going to have a bigger table to handle the more instruments. Started working on the user interface, but you still basically need to have one of our engineers standing next to the computer, turning things on. Where the computer system is adaptive, but it's still held together with tape and Band-Aids. But we actually started getting our first user studies where we had other technicians use it and giving us feedback. And one of the some of the very early feedback we got was, okay, this is great, but it needs to be smaller because our sterile processing departments are small. And so that was one of the big things we learned. But coming out of that, Catalyst by Wellstar was really happy with it. We were doing real work in an SPD, and our other investors, Overline, were like, this is great. We know you guys asked for more money. You told us you needed more, and we didn't get. You guys didn't get it. Here's another smaller round of investment to keep you going, right?
Yeah.
So
you rent's due every day, and you're earning it every day, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Let's be realistic. I'm looking at these. Yeah, because I think I saw one of the things I noticed from some of the research I did was, I know you just talked a little bit about it. The feedback you got. I'm sure you got a lot of feedback.
Yep.
One of it was though, the conveyor belt wasn't going to work. It sounds like it was because the footprint was too big, and you guys described it as the vertical. You went vertical with it because to limit that 2D footprint. And it's funny when we were selling it as sterile processing in big brand new hospitals and small ones in Manhattan, New York, right? Where you can imagine real estate tends to be sort of, valued more.
Yeah.
And you'd be working in a footprint that was, totally inappropriate for the level of work they had to do. But it wasn't like you can say, hey, let's just knock out the back of the building. And, it's a whole separate issue. So footprint is a big issue everywhere you go. And sometimes it's in our experience, more important in some places than others, but it still matters everywhere. Anything else, just out of curiosity, anything else you learned? Because you're coming in with fresh eyes, right? So you not only don't have old habits, but you also maybe have some blind spots.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anything that jumped out at you that you learned that you thought, oh, wow, I wouldn't have thought of that.
Yeah.
But now that I know it, got it.
Yeah. So
anything else?
I would say one of the things that was really surprising to us is, so we were concentrating on these kind of more minor orthopedic trays, general surgery instrument trays, but hanging out in SPD in Windy Hill, we would see once in a while 20 loaner trays dropped onto SPD before everyone was trying to go home. And
just once in a while?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's like, we'd be like, oh, okay, wow. And then the SPD staff's like, oh my goodness. And we're like, what are those trays? Where are those coming from? And so we didn't really know anything about the whole loaner system and all the wrapping they were doing. And there'd be like one at Windy Hill at one point. Yeah. When they got to like one or two people having to turn over 20, 30 trays pretty quickly for the next day before they could go home.
And you see this, and they're not supposed to do this. And we see it everywhere.
Yeah.
Rep comes at 4:30 and goes, these are for the revision total knee tomorrow at 7:30, and sterile processing is like,
yep,
seriously. So okay, but now you're going to explain something to me. I wouldn't have thought of your technology for that application. And how does it have application there?
Yeah, so I would say, like you said, it was actually kind of a blind spot for us for a while. In fact, one thing I skipped over in kind of our customer discovery, we were also, as part of this customer discovery in 2021, we had a partnership with the Veterans Affairs Hospital System where we worked with their innovation people, and they brought us in. We pitched really high level, hey, we're using robotics to help with logistics. And, these are the spaces we think that we want to go talk to people in, but we're trying to go in unbiased, trying to think about how we might help. And they brought us to SPD in 4 different hospitals. We went to Cleveland Hospital, Asheville, Gainesville, Florida, and another one in Florida, and got to see all these places and got to do what we called human-centered research and design. And the VA was really great about this, where we'd interview people and go over different workflows with them and generate these possible products with them. So while we were there, though, what was interesting is we would see these general surgery sets like I expected to see. And then you'd see like maybe a whole bunch of blue wrapped trays over in the corner. We're like, what are those trays? They're like, don't look at those. Those are the bane of our existence, right? So, so then we probably should have honed in on that a little bit more, but we didn't really get in. I feel like our direct customers were these hospital employees. And so we were listening to them. But in Windy Hill, we saw that these loaner trays were becoming an issue for them. It wasn't really until this last summer when, actually, I would say this last summer we had a real opportunity, but a couple of years ago, a couple of people at Zimmer Biomet reached out to us and said, hey, we see that you guys are using robotics to assemble these general surgery trays. Do you think you could inspect and assemble one of our trays? And they said, hey, we're going to be building a facility in Atlanta that's going to be doing, not just being a distributor, but also actually washing and sterilizing trays for ASCs and hospitals. And we're going to, we see some of the same issues that are happening in hospitals are going to happen in these offsite reprocessing centers. And so that was about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, they asked us about, I was like, send me pictures of your trays. I don't know what they look like or anything like that. So, in this last year, we have we've been accepted into an accelerator program that is run by Plug and Play Ventures, which is this hybrid VC firm that partners with corporate entities like Zimmer Biomet and Parkview Health to bring in companies like us that are kind of developing innovative technologies and help them think about how they might deploy them within their existing structures or how it might change their business. And as part of that, we've been able to get the opportunity to work at the Zimmer Biomet distributor in Atlanta, Georgia.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah. So assembling orthopedic trays.
So that's the end. That's
potentially inspecting.
Yeah, that's the end goal is to be able to do that. So the end goal is both at distributors as well as offsite reprocessing centers. These trays from Zimmer Biomet and Stryker are showing up. And what's really important is chain of custody of knowing when an instrument went missing and who lost it, because then they can bill the right group or entity for who lost that instrument, right? So that's kind of the problem that they're interested in. And so,
okay.
I would say, and there are a number of solutions out there trying to solve this. You'll see systems where you put a tray like on a weigh and it'll tell you, hey, it should weigh 20 pounds, but it weighs 19. You're probably missing something, but you don't actually know what's missing with that. Sometimes they have camera systems on them that are stationary. You'll take a picture from top down. Mm-hmm. But a problem with that is typically you can't see everything with a single camera image from a top-down view. Even people can't. So when you have a person doing this job in a distributor, they're taking things out of the tray, they're looking underneath, they're looking at the instrument to make sure it is clean, they're putting it back, they're looking for numbers on the instruments to make sure the right sizes are there. They're opening trays with tens of screws in them to make sure they're all there, because the last thing you want to do is be in a surgery and you don't have the right size screw. And we know with the demands on the sales reps, how many trays they've got to bring, we know they're not looking at every tray. And typically an instrument goes missing. And in fact, it probably went through multiple checks before it went missing. And
totally.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
well, having been the guy who brings the trays into a hospital, puts them back together, works in sterile processing, and assembles our trays. I don't do much of it anymore, but I used to do a lot of it, because I'm the one, this is what every single orthopedic or spine or trauma rep will tell you is, I'm the one who's going to get yelled at if there's something missing in the room. I'm the one who's going to put it together. Right? Like you talk about chain of command. Mm-hmm. I'm commanding the chain of command. But that's an enormous draw and drag on that. And it's error prone too.
Mm-hmm.
And and it's interesting. If assembling trays is part of it, but inspecting, making sure there's no bone cement stuck on it, or making sure a joint that's supposed to manipulate
Still moves.
manipulates, right? And I don't know if your robot can do that, but if you can eliminate a lot of that other stuff, at least I can use my domain expertise on the things that must be checked that maybe a robot can't.
Right.
Or so,
Yep.
what do you?
How
How
do we
do you
think
look
about
at
that?
that? Because there are things robots can't do,
Yep.
right?
Yep. Absolutely. So I mean, I do believe with the pace of robotic development, within the next 5 to 10 years, they will be able to do all of those things. The question
It's interesting.
is the ROI there with respect to the cost of the hardware? That's honestly the only question I have about it. I know it all can be automated. It just depends on if it makes sense financially.
Right. The technical capabilities are either there or soon to be there.
Yep.
The question is at what price,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
Okay.
So
And it's fascinating. Yeah.
yeah. So then,
Go ahead.
so the way that we're approaching this is we're still going after these kind of like high volume general surgery trays, things like that. But we're working with Zimmer Biomet to prepare for the next version of our system that will be able to do more fine manipulation and inspect all these trays, because there's a lot of data that has to be collected in order to enable the robotic systems to go grab things and how to manipulate.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. There's a lot of, just as an aside, there's a lot of instruments that are torque limiting or have specific torques. And once they get out in the field and you're using them, you can look up and that mechanism has not been checked, tested for years.
Right.
And I've always thought like, man, there's a big gap in that quality control. And the reps get so good that they can say like, I just watched them. It was that thing clicked off way too
easy. That's interesting. Yeah.
And it's almost by sense of smell versus actual data.
Right.
And I was taught long ago, if you're not sure, send it back. So like, that's what you would end up doing. But that's not exactly very scientific.
Yeah.
And I would assume someone with your engineering background goes, what is he talking about?
Yeah. And we make in human-centered research and design, we talk about that being kind of tribal knowledge or siloed knowledge that when that person goes to another company, that organization loses all that information. Right. So if you're a Zimmer Biomet, the last thing you want to know is that these little clicks are in the heads of your sales reps that might jump to Stryker next month. Right.
There's all kinds of things in the heads of these salespeople that shouldn't be there. I'll leave it at that. Being a salesperson, by the way. So, all right. So I love this stuff. So tell me let's talk about sort of your learnings, right? And maybe if you're comfortable, some things that you're like, ooh, wish I'd have known that.
Yeah.
So talk to me about some things. And I want to also ask in the commercialization, where are you guys? Do you have some customers that are already buying? Or are you still at that point where you're, near ready for what some people will call commercialization?
Yeah.
What's your status there?
Yeah. So we've been very careful about not deploying anything too quickly without ensuring that it is safe for everybody involved. Right. So we're really concerned about that. And also we're inventing a brand new product. We're not just like saying, hey, this is a humanoid robot. It's going to do what people do, make it work. Now we're really thinking about, this is a new machine. There's a new human robot interface that's happening between the user and this robot. And so we've actually gone through about 4 or 5 different MVPs, and we physically have built them and gone on to the next one. And in the iterations, we either bring it to a hospital at Wellstar, or we bring sterile processing technicians to our facility at Georgia Tech. So we're part of Georgia Tech's incubator called ATDC, and we've got a great space here where we bring people. We've actually hosted the Georgia Sterile Processing Association board here, and they gave us feedback.
Oh, nice.
So that's how we've been iterating.
I will be coming to visit.
Great.
By the way,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're totally welcome.
Yeah.
And so we're at a phase now where in January, so we've done like pilots that are with very close friendlies, right? In the last year and a half. Right. And in January, we're branching out to some other hospital systems, as well as some off-site reprocessing companies. And that we'll be able to announce, in January, February, that we're doing that. So it's really like we're going towards really friendly pilots to branching out of our close friendly pilots to, early adopters who that will transition to
the Gen Pop.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. I like that. It's funny. I've worked with companies at your stage or a little bit after several times. And one of the things I've come to appreciate is, people say, oh, big companies, small companies like yours, startups are, Steve Blank says this in the lean startup. It's MVP. Kevin's talking about is minimum viable product, right? It's basically what could work. You put it in front of people. You don't necessarily, you hope they buy it, but you really need the feedback. Like it's, and then iterate and fix, change, alter, improve quickly. And, but Blank says it best. He says, startups are not big companies miniaturized. It's almost like a grown adult and a baby. Their DNA is the same, but they are completely different humans, right?
Absolutely.
And he describes it as a like a grand experiment. You can have a business plan, but it's really a waste of time. You have a theory, you test it with a minimum viable product, and then you see if you were right or you iterate quickly. Has that been your experience?
Absolutely. I would say, and it's mixed. One of our investors in the first round, they're really professionals. They're generalists. They don't know this one group. They don't know healthcare as well, but they're like, yeah, we expect you to have a financial plan, but as soon as you give that to us, we rip it up and throw it away. Right? We wanted you to make the plan, but we know it's not valid. Right. And so that's how they want you to think, especially early stages. They're like, what we're betting on is you as the co-founders, and that you are going to iterate and find a way to make this work. That's what you, and they talk about this kind of in that lean startup book as well. I would say one of the things I learned as well, this is probably being naive, kind of coming out of academia. I was like, oh, well, I have a PhD in robotics, and they often ask, why should you build this company? Why you? And even though having like family members who worked in healthcare, it's really about like, do you have the professional network of people that are going to help you get through all of these roadblocks? It's not about whether you can execute on it just technically or building the product, but do you have a team of people that can open up doors, especially in an industry like healthcare, where a lot of it, much more of it is relationships. And that was eye-opening for me. And I think that's something I always tell. Georgia Tech has me speak to like young entrepreneurs at Georgia Tech who are in college and want to start companies. And everyone has that incorrect assumption. They're like, oh, well, I'm a smart guy and I could do this or gal, right? And it's like, no, your network really is much more important than you realize, and everyone hears it. But now I feel like we really know it.
Yeah. Now, that's actually interesting, and I love asking people these things that they've learned, because it's funny, when you're in a startup, you tend to be open and honest, like, oh, I wish I'd have known that, or I sort of knew it but didn't appreciate it, or had no concept. And then there's things where you go, I knew it and you were right, and it's okay. Like what you're trying to do is get the best thing, the best product to the market, the safest way, as fast as you can. Right. And deliver what you're shooting for every day. And I think it's just different. And I admire people who do it. This is why I had this podcast, because it's cool to talk to people who have already met. I mean, Richard Branson, I'm sure he's interested in interviewing. If he wanted to be on this, I'm sure I'd let him come on.
Yeah, maybe.
I actually like talking to people like you who are currently doing it. And so one of the things I like to ask people, and it's a weird question, and I don't prep anybody for this, so this is the first time Kevin's hearing this, is, and there's no wrong answer. If the tooth fairy visited you tonight and you woke up, and I hope you don't lose a tooth, but let's say you did, you put it under your pillow. If the tooth fairy put one thing under there that you would want, what would it be? And I'll give you some things to think about, so you don't have to. Could be $1 million in venture capital. Could be a new technology part of it that you're like, oh, we have to build this, and they just saved us 8 months. Or it could be an understanding to something. What would you love to turn your pillow over and go, holy smokes? What would it be?
Yeah, so this will be me being an engineer. What I would really like is a well-defined requirement for the product in terms of what is really the bioburden you're looking for. What are all the functionality checks, and then associate with that the value of that in the market, really, right? And so that's something even with all the research we've done, all the executives we speak with, all the sterile processing technicians. You get a lot of opinions on all those things, and it's nebulous. and we're making
Yes.
I've heard from some other really smart business leaders, you're only 70% sure. And that's how you have to make your decisions, on 70% accurate information. And I think we're beyond that, but it's that. So we are continuously in these MVPs, we're learning and focusing and updating those product requirements in order to make them more concrete. Because if you give engineers all the product requirements and how much money you can spend for building that system, good engineers can turn that out, right? It's the startup's job is to figure those out, especially when you're developing a new kind of novel product. Yeah.
Well, I think, and it's funny, that is such an engineering answer,
Right.
but it's such a good one. It's kind of like, could just somebody tell me the North Star and I'll get
Exactly.
us there, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. So
I love it. I
it's
never know what people are going to say. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, and to round that stuff out, we've recently brought on some professional business development people and who have sales experience, and they've also really helped us with that North Star. And I think some of that is, with our engineering mindset, we want to be really, really sure. And sometimes you need someone who's a little bit more of a salesperson who just has more of a gut feeling that, yeah, this is the right way to do it, and I'm going to speak confidently about it. And that helps pull us engineers that are constantly planning for worst case scenarios in the right direction.
Yeah, what it is, I know, because I've served that role with some engineers. Sometimes you just, and I found actually the best thing to do is, instead of me saying, hey, my gut's telling me this, because frankly, if Kevin lived his life off his gut, he wouldn't be an engineer.
Right.
Like that's, and I couldn't be an engineer but what we end up doing is I say, all right, listen, here's my theory. You have yours. Let's go stand in front of 10 people and I'll get them to tell us. And then maybe we can get 70 or 80% agreement. And then you and I can both sleep at night.
Yep,
your brain and my gut can sleep, right?
Absolutely. That's the way to do it.
Yeah. Well, it's the experiment. So look, I will tell anybody that's listening and watching this, check out Riff Robotics website. And I'm going to ask Kevin in a second to tell people where they can get in touch with him. Because this is where the market's going. It's not quite there yet because people like Kevin are figuring it out every day. But I think people should know what they're doing, pay attention, and because these guys are going to solve problems that exist right now. And it'll be helpful if we just helped with the functional requirements. That would really help.
Yeah, really help.
Somebody has that would help. Kevin, DeMarco, how do people get in touch with you and Riff Robotics? What's your website?
Yeah.
What's your email?
Yep.
And
absolutely. So our website is rifrobotics.com. You can email me. It's my name, kevin.demarco@rifrobotics.com. And we're also on LinkedIn. If you search for Kevin DeMarco, RIF Robotics, it'll pop up. So love to have people in the industry reach out.
Give them a follow. Pay attention to what they're doing. This is a big problem in healthcare. It's a big problem for sterile processing. And anybody who doesn't feel like they should be helping sterile processing has never met sterile processing. Because once you know them and understand them, you want to help. And that's where I come from. And it's cool that Kevin's doing this. And I admire it because I don't have the brains to do what he's doing. But Kevin DeMarco of Riff Robotics, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks a lot for having me.
Great.
Yeah, this is really, really fun talking to you.
Okay, so here are my 3 takeaways from my interview with Kevin DeMarco of Riff Robotics. Fascinating. I hope you find him as fascinating and what he's doing as fascinating as I do. So here are my notes. When he said this is the way it will be done, and it can be done technologically, it's just a matter of the return on investment. I thought that was a really good point. It's not whether or not robots can do this. They'll be able to, probably sooner than most of us would think. But the question is it going to be worth it? And time will tell. Future will tell, right? I thought it was interesting that he said he's inventing a brand new robot-human interface. I must admit that was not something I would have ever considered, and I'm not sure I still know exactly what it means, but he's got me thinking. And then finally, I loved his comments about the professional network and its value. And he teaches this now when he's asked to speak at Georgia Tech. And it's something that I think someone like myself who's in sales and a connector by habit, I understand the value of it, but it was interesting to hear Kevin say that it was something he probably didn't appreciate. I hope you found Kevin DeMarco and Riff Robotics as interesting as I did. Look for us next time on How I'm Building This on Sutures and Sense, our podcast with people who are disrupting things in med device.